But that's what we do. We go out as a society. That's all we do is go out. Go out to dinner with your friends. That always gets weird. Especially if you go out with a group and you go out to anything like a dinner or whatnot. When the bill comes, it gets weird. Because what normally happens is the bill will travel around the table. People will then begin to pitch in what they think they owe. The problem with this is there's always somebody last to get the bill. A look of confusion and concern comes over their face. They're like, what? Now people see this and they're like, oh, need a couple extra dollars or something like that? And you're like, well, I'm $687 short. So the $2 you're gonna pitch in ain't even gonna put a dent in this. So how about this? How about the bill take another leg? Do another leg.
Good morning. It is Wednesday, April the 12th, and this is The True Conservative. Welcome to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. I'm Ron, your host, and the only true conservative in the United States today. So today, after the Serenity Prayer and the Star-Spangled Banner, we will have no free lunch, Stuart Varney, abortion is not power, rape of the mind, tough choices, and fathers of mercy. All that and more when I get back. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing and remove your hats for the national anthem of the United States of America.
Thank you. And now, there's no free lunch, 250 Economic Truths by David-Bahnsen.
Some paradox of our nature leads us, when once we have made our fellow men the objects of our enlightened interest, to go on to make them objects of our pity, then of our wisdom, ultimately of our coercion. Lionel Trilling. Any view of social order that does not start with individual responsibility leads to coercion. To deny one the consequences of their decisions, even if well-intentioned, is to make them an object of pity, and ultimately to impose upon them our wishes for their life. Coercion is the implied end result, whereas rooting our views in an expectation of individual responsibility allows for agency. It allows for participation in either the good or bad results of what they choose. and it avoids a world where we must ultimately coerce people to act as we wish, because we have never allowed them to end up in the right place all on their own.
And that was There's No Free Lunch by David-Bahnsen. Back in a minute. Thank you. Now a little bit of Stuart Varney, and he's going to be introducing Kellyanne Conway. He's going to talk about young voters.
This, please.
I think we've already won the policy arguments on the economy, on education, on a number of issues. I think we've got some work to do on the young people who think differently on abortion, perhaps, or guns, or climate change. But even there, the Democrats' messages are usually cynical. The thing I'm really concerned about with this, Laura, is that the left becomes a turnout machine with young people.
A turnout machine. That was Wisconsin in the Supreme Court thing, where the liberal won by 10 points because they'd organized the colleges. Can the GOP organize youngsters?
I don't think so. The GOP has a blind spot with the Zoomers, particularly with the culture aspect. So I run an organization called Stop Woke, and a lot of what we do is we focus center-right content on Generation Z voters. I hear over and over and over again from donors, well, Turning Point is doing this, or PragerU is doing that. These are both fabulous organizations. But for every one of those, the left has about 15 to 20 of those. So we are not competing.
Anyway, so whether or not they have the numbers or not, I don't know. But again, the whole point here is recruiting. It's what I've said before. We need to recruit lefties. They keep talking about we need to get young voters. No, what we need to do is find the young voters that are on the left and convince them to vote Republican. And we can do that by defining, or in some cases redefining, actually in most cases just simply defining the issues our way. Okay, the environment. What constitutes the environment? Well, we're going to define that our way, Republican way. What about abortion? We could convince them that in abortion there's no power. There's no power in abortion because there isn't. And we go right at them on all issues that supposedly attract the young voter. And we convince them that we're right about it, and that's the way we approach it. So, because you can have as many organizations as you want, but again, if we're going to approach this from a standpoint where we're going to be looking only at and only for voters that are going to be inherently Republican or inherently conservative, then we're right back where we started from, where we have two parties, both of which are trying to create one-party rule, and we don't need that. Back in a minute. Thank you. So it's not just the left that's brainwashed. It is lefties that are brainwashed by the left. It is conservatives or ersatz conservatives that are brainwashed by the left. And one of those ways is into believing that there is magic answers, that we can have our cake and eat it too, and we just have to keep looking and find the way to do it. No. Sometimes there's a situation where you have to make a tough choice. This is one of the things that Barack Obama was promising America, that he would get rid of tough choices. Because he bemoaned the fact that some people have to make tough choices in the country, that they might have to make the choice between paying the rent or paying their the bill for their insurance. Of course, he never mentioned anybody. He didn't cite one single example of a person that has to make that choice, because it doesn't exist. There's nobody that has to do that. Nobody in this country. But anyways, he was saying that there's people that have to make that tough choice and that they shouldn't have to. That nobody should have to make that kind of a tough choice. Yes, sometimes you do. That's the way it is. Sometimes because of your own mistakes, you make poor decisions, and sometimes due to circumstances beyond your control. You have to make a tough choice. That's just the way it is. Part of life. So you want to be the true conservative, you've got to know and understand that there are no magic answers. Now, part of the reason I'm telling you this is because people are going to come to you looking for magic answers. Okay? And you need to recognize it. Is this person really looking to deal with, especially the people that keep questioning when they say, well, I got a problem. What do you think I should do about XYZ? And you give them a good answer. And then they come back and say, well, yeah, but. Well, yeah, but. And you get 2 or 3 yeah, buts in a row, then you know these are people that are looking for a perfect answer. A magic answer, and there is no such thing. And you got to tell them flat out, sorry, there's no magic answers. You're in a tough spot. You're going to have to choose between this or that, and that's all there is to it. Have a nice day. That's the way you handle that if you want to be the true conservative. Back in a minute. Thank you. So another thing, Stuart Varney, and he's got a lady on here, commentator, whatever. And very important to hear this.
Of that.
Okay, you've got a new op-ed and it says the one pivot Republicans could make to start winning again. I've not read the article, Liz, but you're going to tell us now.
Well,
what's the pivot?
Okay, look, it's on abortion. And I know this is the third rail of Republican politics, but the truth is we are losing elections because Republican leaders, many of them, have taken such a strong stand against abortion. We are the party of freedom and individual responsibility. To some point, that has to weigh in on our calculus on what people should be able to do on abortion. And my view is we got a very strong warning in Kansas a year ago when they put in a very harsh law, anti-abortion, banning all abortions. 61% of Kansas, a deep red state, came out and voted to overturn that. We just saw in Wisconsin, and a very critical swing state, a state that in the midterm elections added Republican seats in their legislature. Just recently, a Supreme Court contest in that state went to a real liberal. Why? Abortion, which energizes young people and women to come out and vote. It is time for Republicans.
So anyways, this is a lady named Liz. And not surprisingly, it's a female that's coming out and advocating for abortion. Probably a female who calls herself a Republican, but is really actually either Democrat or a socialist, and definitely a feminist. And so what we have to do here, again, this is where I talked about recruiting, is we have to tell people and get the message across, abortion is not power. There's no power in abortion. When you go out and the abortion is power for men. Let's put it that way. It's power for men. It's power for the very people you're supposed to be taking power away from. And that's the message that you have to communicate. And so and what the other thing that really bothers me with what she's saying is she is trying to tell us that winning elections is the most important thing, and it isn't. It is culture. It is our values. If we don't have our values straight, it doesn't matter how many elections we win, because we will be no different, indistinguishable from the other side. So again, what we have to do is recruit and convince Democrats, reasonable Democrats. There's going to be hardcore members that are not going to listen, but we have to recruit and convince reasonable Democrats that abortion is not power except for promiscuous men. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now, the robotization of man from the rape of the mind.
The robotization of man. First, let me utter a word of caution. We must not make the mistake of thinking that there is any one particular nation that can be completely identified with this hypothetical land. The characteristics to be discussed can come into existence here. Some of totalitarian characteristics were, of course, present in Nazi Germany, and they can today be found behind the Iron Curtain. But they exist to some extent in other parts of the world as well. Totalitaria is any country in which the political ideas degenerate into senseless formulations made only for propaganda purposes. It is any country in which a single group, left or right, acquires absolute power and becomes omniscient and omnipotent. Any country in which disagreement and differences of opinion are crimes, in which utter conformity is the price of life. Totalitaria, the Leviathan state, is the home of the political system we call, euphemistically, totalitarianism, of which systematic tyranny is a part. The system does not derive from any honest political philosophy, either socialist or capitalist. Totalitarian leaders may mouth ideologies, but these are in fact mainly catchwords used to justify the regime. If necessary, totalitarianism can change its slogans and behavior overnight. For totalitarianism embodies, to me, the quest for total power, the quest of a dictator to rule the world. The words and concepts of socialism and communism may serve, like democracy, as a disguise for the megalomaniac intention of the tyrant. Since totalitarianism is essentially the social manifestation of a psychological phenomenon belonging to every personality, it can be best understood in terms of the human forces that create, foster, and perpetuate it. Man has two faces. He wants to grow toward maturity and freedom, and yet the primitive child in his unconscious yearns for complete protection and irresponsibility. His mature self learns to cope with the restrictions and frustrations of daily life, but at the same time, the child in him longs to hit out against them, to beat them down, to destroy them, whether they be objects or people. Totalitarianism appeals to this confused infant in all of us. It seems to offer a solution to the problems man's double yearning creates. Our mythical totalitaria is a monolithic and absolute state in which doubt, confusion, and conflict are not permitted to be shown, for the dictator purports to solve all his subjects' problems for them. In addition, totalitaria can provide official sanction for the expression of man's most antisocial impulses. The uncivilized child hidden in us may welcome this liberation from ethical frustrations. On the other hand, our free, mature social selves cannot be happy in totalitaria. They revolt against the restriction of individual impulses. The psychological roots of totalitarianism are usually irrational, destructive, and primitive, though disguised behind some ideology. And for this reason, there's something fantastic, unbelievable, even nightmarish about the system itself. There is, of course, a difference in the psychic experience of the elite, who can live out their needs for power, and the masses, who have to submit. Yet the two groups influence each other. When a dictator's deep neurotic needs for power also satisfy some profound emotional need in the population of his country, especially in times of misery or after a revolution, he is more easily able to assume the power for which he longs. If a nation has suffered defeat in war, for example, its citizens feel shame and resentment. Loss of face is not simply a political abstraction. It is a very real and personal thing to a conquered people. Every man, consciously or unconsciously, identifies with his native land. If a country suffers from prolonged famine or severe depression, its citizens become bitter, depressed, and resentful, and will more willingly accept the visions and promises of an expiring dictator. If the complexity of a country's political and economic apparatus makes the individual citizens feel powerless, confused, and useless, if he has no sense of participation in the forces that govern his daily life, or if he feels these forces to be so vast and confusing that he can no longer understand them, he will grasp at the totalitarian opportunity for belonging, for participation, for a simple formula that explains and rationalizes what is beyond his comprehension. And when the dictator has taken over finally, he transfers his own abnormal fantasies, his rage and anger, easily to his subjects. Their resentments feed his pseudo-strength encourages them. A mutual fortifications of illusions takes place. Totalitarianism as a social manifestation is a disease of interhuman relations. And like any other disease, man can best resist its corroding effects if, through knowledge and training, he is well immunized against it. If, however, he is unfortunate enough to catch the totalitarian bug, he has to muster all the positive forces in his mind to defeat it. The raging internal struggle between the irresponsible child and the mature adult in him continues until one or the other is finally destroyed completely. As long as a single spark of either remains, the battle goes on. And for as long as man is alive, the quest for maturity keeps on. Cultural predilection for totalitarianism. In the battle against this dread disease, social factors, as well as personal ones, play an important role. We can see this more clearly if we analyze the ways in which the ideals of a culture as a whole affect its citizens' vulnerability to totalitarianism. The ethics of our own Western civilization are our strongest defenses against the disease. For the ideal of these ethics is to produce a breed of men and women who are strongly individualistic and who have
And that was, let's see here, The Robotization of Man from the Rape of the Mind by Joost-Meerlo. Back in a minute. Thank you. And now the Fathers of Mercy, be angry and do not sin.
Perhaps you came across the story that hit the Catholic news this week, and that is the story about a Polish couple, Joseph and Victoria Olma. And this Polish couple had 6 children. They were waiting for their 7th child to be born, and they were farmers. And they worked hard at their farming, but even more so, they worked hard at living their Catholic faith. Well, just before dawn, on March 24th, 1944, the arrival of Nazis came to their home. Their home was raided, and the couple and their 6 children were forced outside of the home, where they were each executed by the Nazis. They were martyred. And you might be thinking, what was their crime? What was their crime? They were protecting 8 Jewish people up in the attic of their house. They wanted to save these Jewish people from being oppressed or killed by the Nazis. They were performing an act of faith and love. And it just so happens that on September 10th of this year, they will all be beatified, including the baby in utero. It will be the first unborn baby in the history of the church to be beatified. What an amazing thing. What an amazing thing. But their crime against the state, what was their crime against the state? They were protecting 8 Jewish people in the attic of their home. Their crime was to think that it was wrong to murder innocent people. This brutal atrocity could never happen here in the United States. Things like that don't happen in America. Or do they? If you have been keeping an eye on the headlines the last few weeks, you would have noticed just a couple of weeks ago a particularly interesting story. This story is about a whistleblower in the FBI. And this whistleblower came across a memo that was being passed out through the FBI to the different agents. And the memo was about Orthodox traditional Catholics. This memo was stating to the agents that they should keep a lookout for traditional-minded Catholics because I guess they're very dangerous people. For example, those Catholic folks who believe, some of them believe that little innocent babies should be protected. And those horrible people who pray at the abortion mills, their homes should be raided and those people should be arrested. How dare they pray in an abortion clinic? That's a horrible, horrible terroristic act, according to these people. Those folks believe that sacred marriage is between a man and a woman. Oh, that is intolerable. Just this past week, a young police officer in Georgia was fired from his job because he had the nerve to, I think he tweeted a message that he believed that the way God set it up was for man and woman to be married. right? And he was fired for that. He was persecuted for it. These dangerous Catholic folks don't believe in drag queens to be performing in front of young children in elementary schools. How close-minded they are. Those Catholics are so dangerous. These folks don't believe in the transgender gen of mutilating the bodies of children. They don't believe in gender-affirming care, as it's called. It's not care. It's child abuse. Let's call it what it is. Those folks don't believe in the better off dead mentality that's practiced in the state of Oregon, and now they're trying to pass legislation in Vermont where it makes legal assisted suicide, physicians assisting people to kill themselves. This is awful. And yet this is what Catholics are being blamed about in this memo passed around in the FBI. It seems that everything in our world has been turned upside down. What has been taught as moral truth for the past 2,000 years has all been called into question. And you can see definitely two camps forming in the church itself. Two camps are forming. It's sad to say that it has gotten so bad that I have to tell people what they need to do is obey the true magisterium of the church. Why should we even have to make a distinction like this? That we have to obey the true magisterium of the church. The truth that has been handed down to us over the last 2,000 years. The truth that we read about in the Catechism of the Catholic Church. That's why I tell people who are confused right now, you need to pick up the Catechism of the Catholic Church. You have to become familiar with it. You have to learn everything in it. Because when people start challenging things in that catechism, know that they are the enemy. They are the enemy. And make no mistake about it. In Europe right now, there are conferences of bishops who not only want to do away with sexual morality that's been taught for 2,000 years by the Catholic Church, they also want to go after natural law. These are crazy and dangerous times we live in. So I'm going to stick with St. Paul the Apostle, who in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 says, God chose you from the beginning to be saved through sanctification by the Spirit and belief in the truth. Therefore, brothers, stand firm and hold fast to the traditions that you were taught, either by oral statement or by a letter of ours. End of quote. And then St. John Paul II, great saint. I miss him, but I'm sure he's doing more good in heaven than he could have done here on earth. But let me tell you, when he was here on earth, he tried so hard to warn people throughout the world what was coming. He was a prophet. He knew it was coming. And so in his great encyclical, Evangelium Vitae, also known as the Gospel of Life, he says the following: given such a grave situation, we need now more than ever to have courage. Courage to look the truth in the eye and to call things by their proper name without yielding to convenient compromises or to the temptation of self-deception. In this regard, the reproach of the prophet is extremely straightforward when the prophet Isaiah says, woe to those who call evil good and good evil, who put darkness for light and light for darkness. End of quote. Back a few months ago, I gave a homily, and a man said that, gee, Father, you seemed angry during your homily. And I was thinking about it, and I was thinking, is that really bad? Is that really bad? Yes, I am angry. But I have to make sure that my anger is good anger, that my anger is righteous anger. For St. Paul says in Ephesians chapter 4, be angry and do not sin. He didn't say be not angry. He said be angry, but do not sin. For a very good reason. Anger, of course, is an emotion. It was created by God. The emotions are good. But unfortunately, our parents, Adam and Eve, committed the original sin. What was very easy for them to do in the garden before that original sin is so hard for us to do right now. And it was hard for them after they committed the sin, because all of their emotions and passions were under reason. Everything came easy to them. For example, if I were given the choice of eating, I want to say, a beautiful, rich chocolate sundae. Oh, being a chocoholic like I am, that sounds so good right now. When I was in the seminary, we used to have these chocolate city sundaes we can get at a particular store, a particular restaurant, and it was, oh, if you like chocolate, oh, a homemade chocolate brownie in the bottom of the bowl, and then 3 scoops of dark, rich chocolate ice cream, and then hot fudge poured over that ice cream, and then homemade whipped cream put on all the top of that, and then a nice red cherry to top it off. It was to kill for. Now, if I were asked today, would you rather have that chocolate sundae, or would you rather have Brussels sprouts? I would probably say the chocolate sundae. But if Adam and Eve were asked that before the fall, you want to know what they would say? We definitely want the Brussels sprouts, because the Brussels sprouts are good for us. That chocolate sundae would not be good for us, for our health, you see. So after the fall, all of our emotions have been messed up, so to speak. Especially, I think, the emotion of anger. And so some people think that all anger is wrong, but it is not wrong. Anger is good. It's when we don't let our reason control our anger, that's when it becomes sinful. So the example that I'd like to use is this. I talk about abortion, right? So what's the purpose of anger? I'm getting ahead of myself now. In order for us to practice certain virtues, we have to have the emotions. To practice certain virtues, you must have an emotion to help you practice that virtue. So we've been talking about the virtue of courage. You want to have courage? Then you have to have the emotion of anger. You have to have the emotion of anger. Because that emotion of anger will help you be courageous when times are tough. Let me give you this example.
And that was be angry and do not sin. We need courage now more than ever, from the Fathers of Mercy. Back in a minute. This is Ron, your host, the only true conservative in the United States today, bidding adios to all the butchers, bakers, and candlestick makers out there. So I'm reminding you that the left has no authority, no power, and they can't win.